You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin'? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over some of the best decks heading into the European International Championships. Usually during the week, I do the top 10 best decks videos, followed by the other 11 through 20 videos. Things are going to change up a little bit, and I'm not saying that those videos are gone forever. I'm not saying that this is the new style. I'm experimenting right now, and I think it's a good idea for myself to try to push myself as a content creator. That being said, I will give you my 5 personal picks for the European International Championships this weekend. I am not attending the events. I decided not to, and I will be going to the Indianapolis, Indiana Regionals coming up in early May, along with a few others coming up in May, but either way, that's my next up event, and these are decks that I'd also heavily consider for that event. Obviously, I want to see the results of EUIC first. The lists are going to be available in the pinned comments, so check that out below, along with reference videos if I have any created. Some of them are a little bit newer than others, but I've been actively working on these decks from a personal standpoint, so I think it's going to be really cool, because in my top 10 deck videos, there's some decks that I'm like, hey, you want to know what? I don't necessarily like this deck. And I'm not necessarily going to speak highly of every single deck. I think I'll try my best. But it's one of those things where for these ones, I'm like, yeah, you want to know what? These are decks that I test every single day, nonstop as a professional player. So yeah, hit that like button right there. You know what I'm talking about, that one. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments below what you think my top 5 are. Might be similar to the top 5 in Pokemon. Might be different. We're going to find out. Let's jump into my number 5 choice. Kicking it off at number 5, and one of the best decks in the entire game. I want to start that off and just be like, I think Inteleon might be one of, if not the best decks in the game. I have this deck at number 5 because I want to test this deck a little bit more. It's one of those things where, in my experience, it's not living up to the hype, and that could fall on me as a player, or maybe I just don't necessarily like the options that are currently available for this deck. I have been testing a little bit of kind of future format Astro Radiance, and maybe I'm too acclimated to those cards. Arceus VSTAR is all about using Trinity Charge or Trinity Nova. Those are your 2 ways to accelerate your energies, and in this case you're accelerating only to your Arceus. So I mean, that's cool. I mean, I'm all about kind of going with this big attacker. That's what we've largely seen the format be since 2014. Big attacking Pokemon, whether they're basics or some kind of stage 1-ish variation, and V-Stars fall right into that thing. Now we have Starbirth to kind of search for any 2 cards. Again, I really like all those aspects about it. I really like that we have the Sobble, so you can go Keep Calling, go for Shady Dealings. You can go for Shady Dealings, Quick Shooting, whatever. I like how that deck works in a whole, and it's one of those things where that's the core that I like out of this deck. I understand that you need to play Dunsparce in most of these decks to have some kind of way to beat other fighting type decks, and Zigzagoon plus Choice Belt plus minus double turbo on a Trinity Nova is going to get a knockout on an Arceus V. Like, all the lines of play I get when it comes to playing this deck. I find that if you're playing Mirror, it does get a little bit scary when you go second. And that's probably the biggest thing that's holding me back is the Mirror, like, and I want to test this deck a little bit more. I find most cases where you go second with this deck, it's a lot more scary. And I would just like to play with this deck a little bit more to see if there's something that I'm missing, or if that's the case across the board. Again, this is my current list for it. I really like the Clara. It's basically a takeoff of Bruno Sermon's winning list from Sao Paulo Regionals. I don't know what I cut for the Clara, but I do like a Clara Palpad in case we run into like a Whimsicott, or in case you do have to get an Arceus V-Star back, or you can get that Drizzle back that was discarded, or your Dunsparce over and over again. So far, this is just kind of my straight up consistent build of Arceus and Inteleon. Absolutely a fantastic choice. Definitely on my to-do list always to playtest a little bit more. Rapid Striking it up at number 4 is Malamar. Now, Malamar is all about using its Rapid Strike tentacles, and you're doing 40 times the amount that you rip from your deck. And to me, I think that Malamar is absolutely a blast to play. I've definitely been playing this one a lot through coaching because everyone's trying to prepare against this deck, and I feel like I am absolutely great at playing Malamar. It's one of those decks that I have a lot of comfort with, and it's probably because I playtest a lot of Baby Blacephalon. Doing 50 times the amount of fire energies in your hand is very similar to 40 times the amount of Rapid Strike cards in your hand. So I feel like there's some residual learning that I had from that deck, and that was able to kind of expedite my process through understanding. Now, I do think that the whole Shady Dealings package is like, if you need to understand a part of a deck, like, I understand Inteleon, I understand how to play Jolteon, like, these are all decks that are based off of Inteleon engine. Sometimes it's better to learn the engine than just learn the deck. A lot of players don't know that you're supposed to go second with this deck. You are supposed to go second, so you can use either Keep Calling or Brawly on your first turn of the game. You don't really want to be playing Karina's Focus. You really only want to be playing Cynthia's Ambition after one of your Pokemon was knocked out. There's a lot of like little rules, and once you figure those out, that's where Malamar opens up. My thing that holds me back from Malamar, and again, general strategy is ripping Rapid Strike cards from your hand, getting knockouts, rinse and repeat because you have ways to get things back with Ordinary Rod, Rescue Carrier, etc., etc. And I mean, you're a single prize card deck, it's cool. List is heavily based off Joe Bernard's list from Liverpool Regionals. My biggest thing when it comes to Malamar is I feel a lot of top players have figured out how to play against this matchup. I think a lot of Mew players know how to play against Malamar. A lot of Arceus players know how to play against Malamar. There's every single deck that I have some kind of answer to Malamar, and that's what scares me as a player. So that's what's really like kind of why it's lower on the list. I do think it's higher than Inteleon for me, just because of my playstyle and the decks that I've seen success with. Inteleon I very much consider like a Zoroark deck. Zoroark GX decks are very they've been very successful in the game. They're decks that I did not necessarily enjoy back at the time. I had nothing really against them. It's just I preferred playing other decks in the format, saw success in my own way. Now we're here, and it's like, I think this is again one of those decks that I just personally like more than other decks. So this is where I'm going to be putting it at number 4. I think it's very powerful. I think it's very skill-based. I do think a lot of players know how to play around this deck, though, and that's the one thing that holds me off. If I felt like this deck could just beat anything, I would play it instantly. This is one of the decks that I play a lot for fun. It's super fun to play, but we'll have to see how it goes. Single striking it up at number 3 is Gengar VMAX. This is a deck that I assume very few players would put as highly on their list. But you want to know what? It's one of those things where Gengar VMAX always has a home when it comes to me. And that's one thing that I'd want to say is, I, like everyone else, I have my own pet decks. Some pet decks are going to be other than the pet decks. Than other pet decks. I mean, some players like playing like Maractus and all those kind of like things, or maybe like this to me is a deck that I've put in a lot of effort into, and I know this list like the back of my hand. I can play this deck at any given point and do well with it, and sometimes I pull it out because I think it's a strong metagame call. And I think what we have to understand as players is sometimes there are amazing decks, and those decks are going to be Mew and Arceus because they always kind of handle the metagame, and they're always kind of an acceptable choice. Acceptable does not always mean the best choice. I think that there are opportunities to play something like Gengar or Jolteon or even Rapid Strike, the kind of checkmate deck that Robin Schulz played for Liverpool and won Liverpool with. When players can make that correct connect, I think that's what it is. And this is why I always have Gengar in my back pocket. I think the metagame is so close to being very accepting of Gengar. Not enough players are giving this deck credits, nor do they know how to play this deck properly. And they don't know to start with Houndour instead of Gengar. They don't know that there's options like more Pekko to beat the Malamar matchup. Because this deck does pretty well against Inteleon. This deck absolutely smokes Mew. This deck does very well against Jolteon. This deck does very well against Malamar. Yeah, you're going to lose to Rapid Strike. The rest of the metagame just kind of like is not really as important as those decks right now. So I think that Gengar, between just being able to use Fear and Panic, G-Max Swallow Up, the damage modifiers, Tool Jammer, having access to more Pekko, having access to Accelerate Energies, Path to the Peak, like there are no other decks that really have these options, which is what makes it incredibly unique. And I want to invite players to give this deck a try. I actually took this to a Metafy event. It was actually a small tournament ran by Professor Oak's Paradise, but I was able to kind of breeze through the event with Gengar VMAX. And it was like my first PTCGO event in a while. I mean, I haven't had a lot of time when it comes to coaching and content creation and basically running my own events. Hopped in, won the event convincingly. And I think that Gengar VMAX, I don't want to be like, hey, I won a small event, everyone play Gengar VMAX. I think enough players are not giving this deck credit where the credit is due, especially with the strong finishes at Salt Lake City Regionals. I would definitely consider playing this one for EUIC and any of the events that you have coming up this weekend. Absolutely fantastic deck. Number 2 is a deck that I would have never thought that I would have played. So the first time that I heard about Lycanroc was from Colin Ferguson. Shout out, Colin. What's up? It's one of those things where I thought Lycanroc was terrible. I still kind of feel Lycanroc is terrible. And it's one of those things where why would it be at my number 2 spot? Well, I guess I should define terrible. I think in all senses of what Lycanroc VMAX offers. If we look at fighting type Pokemon from the past 5 years, I think that we've seen cards like Buzzwole GX and Baby Buzzwole and all these powerful fighting type concepts. Nowadays, we are not dealing with the same powerful fighting type concepts. We have Stonjourner VMAX. What? We have Lucario VSTAR, which has been a little bit underwhelming. Lucario, or the Lycanroc VMAX just happens to be the best out of those, and this is my take on a fighting dark deck that basically is supposed to counter Arceus and counter Mew. I do want to give a huge shout out to Little Dark Fury. I had the pleasure of hanging out with them this past weekend. They were playtesting some kind of Arceus, Lucario, Galarian Moltres variants. I talked them into the Lycanroc VMAX. We worked on the list a little bit. I worked on the list a little bit after that. They were able to make top 16 at the $2,000 event, just bubbling out of the top 8 cut. So it's one of those things where it's absolutely awesome. So the goal is you're part Arceus deck, and you have that whole Arceus core as we've seen with Arceus and Inteleon, so that we know that part works. Let's move on to the Lycanroc. Lycanroc is a Pokemon you could power up with Arceus, and that allows you to have a great Jolteon, Gengar, matchup. You can have a great mirror matchup, and a lot of people are going to be like, well, they play Dunsparce. Well, you can go Hunting Claws, or whatever. I think Lycanroc's attack is Hunting Claws. Whichever one, you could beam off a Pokemon with 60 HP or less off the face of the planet, draw a prize card. Dunsparce has 60 HP. You see how that works. And then the next thing is players are going to be like, well, they could play Big Charm on their Dunsparce, which is actually like big brain plays. Well, we actually have Tool Scrapper for that, and among other things. If you're playing against a Mew, you basically want to sit in the shadows with Galarian Moltres, offer up Sobbles, and basically use your Cast Form as free retreats, which I believe that this is the better way to be playing Cast Form. And then you could basically kind of roll with that, having some kind of, once they draw 3 prize cards, Fiery Wrath is basically flicked on, you can get knockouts. That works out really well. Everything else is just pretty standard between a Dark Toolbox, Galarian Moltres, Arceus, and Inteleon build. So that's where we're at. I think that this deck is incredibly interesting, and this is the best dark fighting Arceus deck that I've seen played so far, and it's the one that intrigues me the most because it does have that built-in counter to Dunsparce. So for me, this is a deck that I want to experiment a little bit more with, and it's probably why I haven't necessarily been liking Arceus and Inteleon as much. I think the deck needs a little bit more flavor. This to me is more of my personalized version of the deck. However, the straight-up neutral vanilla version of the deck is very good as well. This deck's really cool. I recommend you to try it out. Shout out to everyone who inspired this deck. Here we are at number 1 with Mew VMAX. Now, Mew VMAX is a deck that I've been pretty public that I like Mew VMAX, especially in my videos. I do feature Mew VMAX quite a decent bit, but it's one of those things where I feel like as a competitive channel, I gain the most success, or I share my passion the most is probably the best way to put it, by sharing these competitive decks. I had a great discussion with Little Dark Fury. I was like, he's the guy who likes the rogue decks, very much thrives off that energy. On the complete opposites, if I'm talking about some kind of more Peko V Union deck, I'm going to be absolutely miserable on the inside. I like to have fun like anyone else, but when it comes to Pokemon, I very much enjoy the competitive aspect and nature of the deck, and that's really where my channel is going to be focused from. So, I mean, again, Mew VMAX being heavily considered one of the best decks, if not the best deck, similar to Arceus and Inteleon. Absolutely crushing it out there and being able to copy any kind of attacks with Cross Fusion Strike and having its own built-in draw system with Genesec's Fusion Strike system and having that turn 1 option. No other deck has a turn 1 option to hit for 210 plus damage with Melodious Echo, with Elisa Sparkle, Fusion Strike Energy, Choice Belt, Power Tablets. I have robbed games from players, and I mean, you don't feel like a great person after that, but when it comes to regional championships, getting a $5,000 check for winning or going to EUIC and having that deep run, getting your World's Invite, those are all things that Meloetta can allow you to achieve. So those are things that I think are great. Things that are a little bit different about my list than other players' lists. I run 2 Mew VMAX. I found in a lot of my games I had to struggle to discard my 3rd Mew VMAX. You only ever want to get out 2 in a game. After your opponent knocks out 2, you lose the game. They've drawn 6 prize cards. So you got to think from that mindset that you only need 2. And in this case, Meloetta is such a strong attacker that if you have 1 Mew VMAX, 1 Meloetta, you're probably chilling throughout the majority of the game. And Psychic Leap is still a strong attack, and Glistening Drop is still an attack. I think it's just more of my challenge of how low can you go with a deck like this in order to make space for like the Echoing Horn that I think is important when you're playing 3 double turbo energies in order to play against a Duraludon deck or maybe a Whimsicott deck. These are all opportunities that allow you to make those things happen, and having this access to the Rotom phones and having 4 stadiums. This, to me, is my ideal Mew VMAX list. I know it might not be the ideal list for everyone, but for me, the way that I've been piloting the deck and understanding this deck, I do think that this is a very powerful list. And I might change it up. It's one of those things where I change Mew VMAX up on the daily, on the weekly. I'm continuously like trying to look for new ideas when it comes to this deck. Maybe I want to have the Tool Jammer and a Marnie. Maybe I want to play Judge. These are things that I'm still trying to figure out. And I do have a sideboard list that I bring with me with all the options that I would want to play into a Mew VMAX list. So I think that Mew VMAX is just really good. It's a deck that I'm incredibly comfortable with, and I do think that it does give me a high chance of winning an event. So all of those factors combined, Mew VMAX, absolutely amazing deck right now, and this is my take on it. Give it a try. It looks a little weird at first, but hopefully you enjoy it. And there you have it. We got Mew VMAX on top of the metagame. I know not every single player likes Mew VMAX, and that's totally cool, but in the same way that everyone has their own personal decks, Mew VMAX is actually my favorite deck to play in the format. I think between all of its sequencing and just its like options, like there's not any other deck that has an option to hit for 210 turn 1 with Meloetta. I like that Mew VMAX. It's one of the only decks that I know that can hold itself or hold its own in some poor matchups just by outplaying your opponent. So with very limited options to outplay your opponent nowadays, I do think Mew VMAX is good. There are some cases where Mew VMAX just flops to random dark decks. That can totally happen. Is it probably going to be one of the more counter decks? Yeah, that definitely can happen. But Mew VMAX does have a special place in my heart. So it's one of those things. I like that deck, and it's definitely a deck that I want to playtest a little bit more because I think there's so much more to learn. Just don't look at face value when it comes to the deck. Just don't look at it like as if it's the best deck in format. I think it's one of those things where it is definitely the most skill-based deck in format to play optimally at all times. That is not necessarily even a hot take. So if you've been a Mew VMAX hater or anything else like that, by all means, I invite you to test that deck, because even if you don't like Mew VMAX, it is one of those ones that's going to stick around for a while, and I do think that it's worthwhile to play a deck to understand how it works, right? That being said, lists are all in the description, or not the description. Lists are all in the pinned comment. It's Monday. You can tell that we're still figuring things out today for this week. So it's one of those things. In the description is not where you're going to find the deck. In the description is where you're going to find cool things like ptcgeostore.com. You can use code ZEALSAGE5 to save 5% on your order of codes if you're trying to build any of these decks online. You can go to atlastcg.com, use code ZEAL/8 to save on all of your Pokemon TCG singles. Great store, absolutely great store. And you could go to medify.gg/adsaclassage, get some personal one-on-one coaching with me. It's one of those things with events coming up, and next season even getting up, I can get you primed up into shape. Would love to work with you, and there's a discount code, I believe, in the description as well, so check that out. Who doesn't like a good discount? And yeah, for tomorrow, we will not be doing the top 20 best decks. I think I'm going to replace that with a deck profiling, and again, attempt to stream a little bit more this week, get those full uploads this week, and really just get back into the swing of things. I'm now doing a lot better mentally. I'm not having the stomach flu or food poisoning or whatever I had last week. It's been a rocky past couple weeks mixed with a lot of work in between. So now we are back here, and I'm feeling amazing. So I will catch up with all y'all for the rest of the week. Again, don't forget to hit that like button. It really does help boost the YouTube algorithm in the favor of this video, and subscribe to the channel, and comment anything. Just say hi. I will get back to everyone's comments. I had a busy weekend away at Atlas TCG in Waterloo, Ontario. I was casting their $2,000 event the whole weekend and getting things set up and playtesting and all that kind of good stuff. We're back home for like a little bit until Indy, so I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.